How's it going? And welcome to episode 246 of On the Wire, a proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, and per usual, joined by Kevin Hasting. Kevin, we are almost done. We are in the home stretch of our preview episodes. We're going to finish up our last true category today, talking about saves, save the best for last, all the different puns that I could stretch out throughout the years of doing this kind of show. And then, we'll do our wild card episode next week. But for now, we're going to hit up some closers, some relievers, looking for those saves, scraping away, maybe paying up for them before we get into that, man. How you doing?
Doing great, Adam. Thank you so much. Great to be here as always, and excited to hang out with you and talk some closers late in drafts, which is kind of it's not easy. But I think we'll find some at this point. I really do. I think there's some available this late that we can at least count on early in the season, if not later. And it'll get us started. And then you'll have to stay on it. This is one of those things we talk about all the time. How much work do you want to put into your team?
That's really
how much do you want to have to pay attention? This episode is going to be for people that are willing to work throughout the season to get those saves, because the guys we're going to talk about probably aren't holding a job all year and getting us 25 plus even, let alone 30. So, but this is how you piece it together if you get stuck and miss out on a run earlier in the draft, or you can do it intentionally if you have confidence that you can go through this process throughout the season. A lot of fantasy players like to do it that way. I'm kind of in between. I'm at the point where I want one elite guy, and then I am kind of shopping in this basket towards the end.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm like that way as well, but I found myself in my 3 drafts I have going on right now. 2 out of those 3, I filled my closers. I filled 2 of those closer spots, or 2 of those pitcher spots with closers in the top 5 rounds.
Yeah.
In our listener league that we are about, where are we now? We're just about to finish round 19, or no, we're in round 20. I double tapped I had the number 1 pick, so Ohtani off the board. And then when it came back around, I went double tapped on the 2-3 turn with Cade Smith and Edwin Diaz. And I had not done that before. Like, I hadn't gone that far at any point last year. But this seemed like the right time to try it out. And honestly, it was weird. I felt really good about it because I focused on the guys that I knew if they were going to be healthy all year. And these are all big ifs, obviously, for anybody that you draft. It's a big if no matter what. But for pitchers and relievers especially, it's a bigger of an if. But these guys are going to strike out. They're going to give me all the categories that you need to get if you're going to pay up, right? So I'm not just chasing saves with these guys. I'm chasing strikeouts. They're on good teams. Cade Smith, I expect to walk away with a handful of wins, as well as Cleveland wins a bunch of really close games. And yeah, so I don't expect that as much out of Diaz. I expect him to be in save situations most exclusively. But we'll see how that works out. And then I grabbed in TGFBI, I believe I got Aroldis Chapman and then Ryan Helsley like 2 rounds later. So I felt really good about that, because I don't like scraping away at the draft. I don't mind fabbing, right? I don't mind chasing them, but I don't necessarily want to focus on this to fill my 27, 28, 29, 30th round picks. I'd rather take my darts elsewhere, because I think the darts, and we're going to talk about this a lot more, the darts you take on a reliever at the end of your draft, you're not going to know if they're going to get you saves, at least for a few weeks, if not a few months into the season. But the darts that you can play into other positions in the last 4 rounds, you're going to know. Like, you might feel perfectly fine dropping them before the end of spring training just because you know. and you're going to be able to make those decisions a lot quicker. So that's, I again love fabbing for them. I like being a week or two early during fab periods, and then churning and burning. But I think there's better uses for the last couple picks of a draft.
Yep, absolutely. I am going to make a spec or two, same listener league that you were talking about. I snagged Iglesias in the middle of the 5th round, and we are in the 20th, and I don't have a second closer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking notes as we're discussing these guys. I am gonna have to make a run on one or two of these guys here late, because I do want a second closer, or who I'm hoping will get me some saves. I want a second guy that I think is going to get me some saves. Ideally, I want the 2 so I can play 7 starters, and ideally I try to get my second one well before this point. Didn't work out in this draft. And so, yeah, I will grab 1 or 2 of these guys in the draft, not wait until I fab them. But as you were saying, they may become a difficult drop if I still think they are my spec closer and I need a roster spot at some point, or I'm looking at other guys that does appear may get saved sooner. We've talked about this in the past. I don't like changing the guy I have on my roster that's speculative for closes, for saves, coming up, because there's so much we don't know just because we think that someone we're not rostering has a better chance than someone we are. It just seems like you drop that guy you've been holding for 3 or 4 weeks, and then he starts getting opportunities. So I don't like changing who it is. However, at the same time, when you're drafting a couple of these guys, they may be a couple of your first drops as you start seeing how things are playing out.
Right. So, I mean, as I'm got one eye on our recording here and one eye on the 3 draft boards, because I just realized I'm only like 2 picks away. I'm 2 picks away within 3 picks in 2 different drafts. So that'll be fun. Hopefully that happens mid recording.
Yeah.
Those are always fun picks to make. But I am also got, part of my eye on my. What's nice is that I'm continuing to use the live draft assistant that Pitcher has put out recently. And though the color schemes of the draft board don't match the NFB draft board, that part like always throws me off. And I'm like, it looks closer to like a Fantrax color scheme for the draft board. But I'm almost exclusively drafting an FBC this season. That throws me off. But besides that, just keeping everything organized has been a godsend. And then I think I talked about this last week, but like I almost exclusively use this cheat sheet in the live standings tab. The cheat sheet, which is nice because I can toggle between the PL rankings, Scott Chu's hitter rankings, Rick Graham's reliever rankings, and obviously Nick Pollock's starting pitching rankings. And they also include the valuations from PLV projections. It's really interesting to see where the rankers, yeah, I guess that's the word, differ from the projections. And I think that's really important point to keep in mind as you are considering rankings and projections and your own valuations on players. Like nothing is set in stone. Like you should not be drafting based on one source of truth, except for your own source of truth. And your own source of truth should be being made up of a variety of inputs, whether it's strategy based on roster construction, or different projections, or just the eye test, watching guys. And obviously news is going to impact a lot. We saw the Jurickson Profar thing come through today. That's obviously taking him off of any boards that he might have still been on. We've seen Hunter Green's diagnosis of some tightness in his elbow come through the other day. That obviously is going to impact. And so this is my way of trying to squeeze in some news here, Kevin, even though, we try not to in these episodes to make them a little bit more evergreen for the season. But anyway, just the again, I can't give it more credit. The live draft assistant has been a really great tool for me to use, and you guys should be using it too.
I'm using it for my Champions League qualifier
There you go.
draft and hold currently. It has been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But a funny thing that something about you just mentioned, did you have anywhere where when you saw the Profar news, you had frantically went to a league? He was at the top of my queue. I was on auto, and there was one more pick before me when I got to it. I think I had seen the news that had been posted. I think the post was 7 minutes earlier, and he was my Knicks pick.
If you hadn't seen it,
I got to it in time and got him out. So
nice.
that was a little excitement yesterday.
Excitement you didn't need, I'm sure.
Yes.
No, luckily I don't have him anywhere, and he was not in my queue. I did not fit your situation. Glad it's something I didn't have to worry about. Though, I mean, again, I will advocate for this feature request in any platform, and I always shout it toward NFBC. There is a watch list, and there's a queue. There should also be an anti-queue. You should be able to take guys off your board so you don't accidentally draft Pablo Lopez or Schwellenbach or Profar in this case, guys that you know are completely out of the running. They're not pitching. They're not playing during the 2026 season. You're not going to draft them. It would be nice to just be able to like go through and take them off the board, off of your board. So you couldn't, on the off chance that your queue gets decimated and Profar's the next guy up, he's gonna get auto drafted if you're on auto draft, or if you just took too long, especially in a 1 hour draft time clock. So it can happen. It'd be nice. Maybe next year. All right. Well, Kevin, we got to talk about the idea of having to draft saves, right? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about a specific category. It's the only category. It's the only episode we do where we physically only talk about one category. Technically, opportunity, we're only focused on average is the only category, but we talk about playing time and batting average, and plate appearances and at bats and whatnot as well. Saves, it's all we care about. Now, can you consider strikeouts? Sure. But what we really care about is filling that last category on the 5x5 chart. And we talked a little bit about already paying up for them. I went 2-3. I filled up 2 out of my first 5 picks in another draft. You started off with Iglesias, which is an interesting choice. Like, I don't think I could do that right now. Especially Iglesias, who, I don't have any trust in that situation for him, holding on to that job for the first 2 or 3 months of the season. I don't know how could you bring yourself to do you have more faith in that situation than I do, or was that just like, crap, I forgot. I forgot, I just skipped out on all these closers. What was the situation for you in that moment?
Well, I pay a lot of attention to Rick Graham's articles at Pitcher List, and Iglesias in the second half changed his pitch mix, and he was back to holding his position. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is big risk here with Suarez being there waiting in the wings. If Iglesias performs as he did at times, especially in the first half last year, Suarez probably takes over that job. I just think that Iglesias's leash is probably longer than most would be when Suarez is there waiting to take over the position. I think Atlanta gives him a full-blown shot at running with this, and that he will hold it. Ideally, this is one of the few situations where I would handcuff and grab Suarez. But haven't always been able to do that. I have Iglesias in multiple leagues. I just think he will hold the job. Unless he's injured. I think this pitch mix in the second half sticks, and he's going to be good and holds the job. Atlanta does have the luxury that they have a pitcher with closing experience and amazing stuff that could take that role. Hopefully they are just able to use him in high leverage situations earlier in the game, not necessarily always the 8th. So they might be able to use him earlier, have the luxury of having someone that they are confident. Even Dylan Lee is a bit of a threat to get a couple of saves there in Atlanta, I believe. But I think with that pitch mix that Rick Graham was writing about in his most recent article, I'm confident that he holds it for the season.
See, the thing is that he should have lost the job last year, but Atlanta didn't give him or anybody else a save opportunity for like 3 straight weeks. We thought Dylan Lee was a huge pickup, right? In a lot of different leagues. And it seemed like, oh, this is a no-brainer. This is the next opportunity is going to Lee. The problem was there were no opportunities. And by that time, Iglesias had, as you said, reestablished himself and created a stronger foothold on the situation. So when that opportunity did arise, he was kind of there waiting for it and ready to take advantage. So you don't always run into that situation, especially for a team that you expect to be good, expect to be winning games, to go that long without an opportunity for anybody. And you talk about that's a situation that we're going to talk about handcuffs a little bit later, but like handcuffing Iglesias, you grabbed Iglesias in the middle of the 5th round in our draft. But in order to handcuff him, Robert Suarez went in the 5th. He just went 10 rounds later. And that can arguably be like, that's too high of a price to pay for a handcuff.
That's why I don't have him. Or he was definitely in my queue, but I wasn't taking him yet.
Yeah. And so I understand why he went where he went. Like he went that, I understand him going that high because anybody drafting him in the 15th round thinks, hey, he's got a strong chance of either taking the job early. He thinks opposite of you. And that's fine. But the person drafting Iglesias, yourself, you've got more confidence, especially if you're going to pay 5th round value. You're not going to use that much draft capital to handcuff your. Now we'll get into some later options later on for some guys you might be able to handcuff at the end of your drafts, and whether or not that's a good strategy or not. But of the guys that are going in the top 5, top 6 rounds, is there anybody there that you feel less confident about? And you're like, I don't feel as confident about Iglesias as you do, or maybe as Rick Graham does. So he would have been my pick here. But like between him and Ryan Helsley was kind of the last one in this bunch. I picked him at the end of the 5th round. But we have Devin Williams moving across, the town with the Mets. David Bednar staying with the Yankees. We've got Edwin Diaz going across the country to the Dodgers. Cade Smith taking over in Cleveland. Mason Miller taking over in San Diego after being traded at the deadline last year and not having the closer position. And then Yohan Duran taking over in Philadelphia after being traded to Philadelphia last year. Andre Munoz is pretty much the only one in this top 10 group who is like held that position on the same team for multiple seasons. And he's the one that like, I love him because
he used to get frustrated when he was used earlier in the game when we wanted saves out of him. Yeah.
So of that group, is there one that you feel like least confident about? Like, not that they're completely off your board, but like they would be the 10th in this group.
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with his skills, and it doesn't have anything to do with how I think the Los Angeles Dodgers will deploy Edwin Diaz. I just trying to roll with a Dodgers closer has not worked out well for us in recent seasons. And so, I don't doubt any of these guys' skills you just brought up. A couple of them we may have injury concerns, but for most they've kind of went away. I think they've been healthy over the past season or two. So I'm not holding that against any of these guys, but I have not picked Edwin Diaz in any draft, and I will take relievers that early. I just haven't snagged Edwin Diaz, and I have a hard time clicking draft on a Dodgers closer this early in a draft.
It is, we talk about a little bit about, well, and in just a second, I want to talk to you about the whole value of these players, because we are drafting just one category. Ultimately,
Right.
yes, there's some guys that it will not hurt you as much in strikeouts or might even help you, but ultimately you're just drafting one category. And so as far as like auction values are concerned, or just overall value in general, the dollar values are never gonna even up or match up with the other guys that are going in the same rounds. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that, but first we do have to take a quick break. All right, so I'm going to use PLV projection valuations from the live draft assistant that I'm going down. So Mason Miller, Aroldis Chapman, well, Josh Hader is still valued at in the top 3 as well, based on just projections. Obviously, there's some nuance there. Cade Smith and Edwin Diaz, Yohan Duran, Devin Williams. These guys are all worth $15 or more in PLV projections. Okay, put that in perspective. All these guys are going in the top 4 rounds in most 15-team drafts. Put that in perspective. Guys going in the first round, not even at in the top 5 picks. We're talking Vlad Guerrero Jr. worth $21, Ketel Marte worth $17, Jazz Chisholm $16, Pete Alonso $20. So all these guys going in the top 3 round, like 1, 2, 3 rounds, are all worth more, or at least the same as Mason Miller. And then there's a big drop off, right? But we're still willing, we as a drafters, maybe not any individual listening, but in general, your draft room is going to pay up for these closers. Should we be like, is there enough value, especially in a standalone league where we're only drafting one category? Having the fact that there is only one category in scarcity play enough of a role to to justify paying above market value based on projections?
The standalone league would be a little different in my mind. You may be able to hold back, wait a little longer. When you were asking this question, I saw Ariel Cohen at First Pitch Arizona a few years ago talking about this very thing, right? Our values that we have set up, our auction values or draft values, right? Those are based on projections. That is the value we expect them to return at the end of the season if they perform as the projections, close to what the projections say. That's not the market price. The market price is completely different. That's what we're talking about here. And if everybody in your league or close to it is in that market, you almost have to be. Now, the standalone league is a little different, right? Maybe you don't need to be, but usually when we're drafting, we have to get away from what the auction values we have are. If everybody in your league is paying $20 for their second catcher, if you want one of those guys, you have to pay that, right?
Fair.
Just to take it to an extreme, non-realistic example to kind of make the point, right? If you're not getting even some of the guys we might be talking about, if you're not willing to draft them earlier than the projection state they should be, but we have to deal with the market price during our drafts, not the projected value. Completely different, and we have to separate them. It's very difficult, but we almost have to, other than in the standalone leagues, like you said.
Love it. Speaking of Rafael Iglesias and Josh Hader, interesting. They just went back to back in my TGFBI league at the 7-8 turn. So according to you, they got Iglesias at quite the deal. 3 rounds later than you're willing to pay up for. So again, that's actually a great example of the whole market um idea here. I mean, in this league alone, all of these guys that we're talking about have all gone, but they all went on average a round later than in other previous 15 team drafts that I've done so far this season, including Glarf and our listener league. And so I mean, I'll echo exactly what you said with one line. It's like, you got to know the room. And you got to kind of go with the flow and be able to pivot based on what everybody else is telling you. Now, if one or two guys in the room are doing something different, whatever, that's fine. That is a wild
I can
card.
open things up for you. Absolutely.
But when the entire room is, jumping on board, you've got to find a really big pivot, or you got to jump on. You just got to get ahead of them whenever you can. So no matter what happens in your room, it will create different opportunities. You just have to know where they are. And if that means your relievers are getting pushed up 2 or 3 rounds earlier than you expected, then so be it. I mean, that means somebody else is getting pushed down 2 or 3, or another group of players will be pushed down 2 or 3 rounds. And so there will be an opportunity to get the guys you want. You just have to kind of go roll with it and figure it out. So great analysis there. And ultimately, all right, let's go down to the middle before we get to the end. You are going. I mean, you're obviously you're pushing up Iglesias a little bit, but the guys after the top 10. We're talking about the guys that a lot of them are guys that we at one time trusted. So like Pete Fairbanks, elite closer, like as long as he's on the mound. Guys that are doing that for us. Let's look at this. Munoz a little bit. Jeff Hoffman is another one who's had a lot of experience, obviously struggled at the end of last year. And we've got Griffin Jacks, who we expect to be that closer in Tampa Bay, who obviously we all kind of expected to take over the role in Minnesota, and except for the fact that he got traded as well. Ryan Walker's had a lot of experience and success in the past. Carlos Estevez, obviously with your Royals, led the league, or just the whole league in saves last year with 42. He still got that job, but still all being drafted in this second or third tier. Is there a name in there that stands out to you the most as, again, the one you kind of trust the most, that you'd be willing to make your first closer and not have to feel comfortable drafting one of them instead of paying up in the first 5 rounds or 6 rounds?
Yeah, a couple of guys that I have done that with in drafts. Estevez, who you mentioned, he has a pretty long leash in Kansas City. And even with Urseg behind him, they brought in Matt Strom. Even with those guys behind him, they have other options. Estevez is going to have a long leash. And he's, for 2 full seasons now, outperformed all of the underlying metrics and projections. And I just think he's going to have a long run here. And then Daniel Palencia for the Cubs is another guy I've taken as my first closer, and I'm comfortable with that. If I can find a second guy, I'm comfortable with him being my first one, though. Absolutely.
But not your only one.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big difference. It's like you can,
because at this point the pool's getting thin.
Yes.
Right? So I that's the reason I'm not ecstatic that he's my first one. There aren't many left to get my second, but I'm perfectly okay with him being my number 1 closer.
Let's rewind a little bit, because that's a great point. Is there a guy in the top 10, top 5 even, that you are comfortable with being your only closer? Like, if you are going to pay up, you know what? I'm happy with Mason Miller. As long as he's healthy all season, he's going to get me the somewhat close to 40 saves, and I will stream the rest. Is there anybody that you feel that confident about drafting in that with that strategy?
The guy I have drafted that way once again this season, and he may not even get to 30 saves if Seattle uses him. A guy I have drafted in that situation and similarly, and knowing that this may happen is Munoz. Um, and he probably gets less saves than a couple of the other guys you mentioned, I would expect. Once again, Matt Brash is healthy again now in Seattle. It's only been a couple of seasons since we saw Munoz getting used earlier in games once in a while in a high leverage situation, and then Matt Brash coming in the ninth or someone else. So that is worrisome. But the other numbers, the strikeouts, the ratios with Munoz, he's going to be in my lineup every week of the season that he's healthy. I'll get the saves he gives me. Yes, I'll be looking for more throughout the season, but I'm just comfortable having Munoz in my lineup and just forgetting he's there. And I only have 8 other pitching spots throughout the year.
Wow. Munoz is the one where I want to trust him.
Yeah.
I don't trust him to stay healthy all year. And with, again, somebody we'll talk about a little bit later, like Matt Brash, kind of like being there and being the the quote unquote obvious choice to take over the role. I don't know that. I mean, and with Seattle's history in the past of, you know what, we've traded our closer before, even while we've been competing. And it's happened before. I can't rule it out from happening again. So I don't know. He was the one they traded for in that situation. So I guess there's that. I want to, because he's obviously very good. They traded for him to be their closer, and he is been in that role for quite some time. So I want to believe you. I don't know that I will be able to pull the trigger on it, or like pay up for it in a league, in a trading league, going into the season. So,
most leagues it's either Mason Miller or Edwin Diaz, the first closer off the board. And I've seen it both ways. I want to say probably about equal numbers of times. I think it really is kind of a coin flip between where those two guys are going in drafts. But when that happens, if I have a pick coming up when I think he's still going to be available, I've been moving Munoz to the top of my queue once those two guys are being drafted.
So you Munoz over Cade Smith, for example.
I love Cade Smith. That's just the way I've leaned. I'd be more than happy to have Cade Smith in that spot.
Yeah. The reason I think I would lean Cade Smith over Munoz alone is Cleveland's going to win games, but they're all going to be close. Right. And so there's going to be a lot more opportunities. They've had a long history of just driving their closer into the ground, between
That's a great point.
Hand and Clase. They continuously lead the league in innings as far as relievers go, and just games pitched in general. So I expect them to do the same thing with Cade Smith until his arm falls off. I just don't think this will be the year that it happens. I think his arm will fall off next year. So I'll take advantage this year. Knock on wood. I don't want that to happen, by the way, going on record. So yeah, that will be, yeah. And then obviously the strikeouts are, more plentiful with Cade Smith than they are with a lot of other guys that are, all the guys that are going in the top 5, they're also giving you your strikeout rate, a very high strikeout rate as well.
This is a little later in the draft, but it's not to the point where we'll be talking about individual players. But I'm curious of your take on the Milwaukee situation, where Megill and Uribe are being drafted and have been for some time right next to each other in drafts. They're a little further apart than they were. They were exactly next to each other for a while. Now they're about 5 picks apart. I think ADP like 5 picks apart. So still right there being picked in the same area of drafts. Do you have a lean here, or are you just trying to avoid the situation?
That is a situation I have avoided and I will continue to avoid. I love Uribe. I was a big proponent of Uribe being the closer and moving into that closer role at one point. I don't know if I trust that his control will be able to keep him in that role if he does take it outright at any given point. And then Trevor Megill's injury history from last year is always in the back of my mind. He tossed a scoreless inning over the weekend, so that's nice. Struck out somebody. He did walk somebody, but I'm not worried about Trevor Megill walking people per se. That's not going to be the reason. I think Trevor Megill has the job unless he's hurt, ultimately. And
I hope you're right. I've gotten away from it for all the reasons you say recently, but earlier in draft season, I was getting Megill later, so I do have several shares.
So I see he's been creeping back up the board, and you can take advantage. Yeah, because of the history. I mean, because of the injury history, of course. Great. I said earlier in the league in the recording that I might come up on a draft pick, and of course I came up. I have 3 picks. I'm on the turn in one in our listener league, and I just drafted Tyler Glasnow in TGFBI. So this is a 20th round, 20th and 21st pick. Kevin, I'm gonna think about who I want to pick here, and while I think about it, we are gonna take a quick break. Anyway, coming back, did make that pick, Kevin, as we talked about. Threw in Yusei Kikuchi and your boy Josh Bell on the turn at picks 300 and 301 respectively. So ADP be dinged. They both got bumped up a good 50 picks according to current or overall ADP, but ADP really means absolutely nothing throughout the course of a draft, never mind in the 21st round. So let's take this opportunity then to segue into the final kind of picks of your draft. So this is where we typically will look at guys that you can get at 325 or later, and they can help you out in the category that we're talking about. Of course, we're talking about saves on this episode. And so last year we played Ask in a weird way where we were just going after like groupings of players that had a shot at taking over the job in any particular city. Like I wanted to get your opinion on like in whatever market, who could be taking over. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this year. Still going to play Ask, but we're going to play like 3-layered Ask, like a 3-layered dip, right? Where we're gonna talk about those guys at the top. So according to ADP in the online championships, the top 9 closers off the board include, in order, Mason Miller in San Diego, Edwin Diaz in Los Angeles, Cade Smith in Cleveland, Andres Munoz in Seattle, Yohan Duran in Philadelphia, David Bednar with the Yankees, Aroldis Chapman in Boston, Devin Williams with the Mets, and then Ryan Helsley in Baltimore. Iglesias would have been the 10th one, but I needed 9. I needed a multiple of 3 for this game to work. So we're not. And plus, the handcuff, again, we talked about this.
We know who it is.
For Iglesias is obvious. He's going way earlier than the ADP would allow. So it kind of worked out. The math worked out nicely here. So what I want to do, I want to talk about is the guys that you could handcuff these. Like if you wanted to, if you paid up, but you know what? I need the saves from this team. Just about all of these have very obvious replacements on their teams, almost all of them. And that's part of this exercise. I want to identify the ones that you don't feel as confident in who exactly their replacement is. I want to identify the pitchers that you have trust or no trust in taking and keeping the job if the opportunity were to arise. And then the guys who, it's pretty obvious, like they're coming in and they're not going to hurt me on being on my roster in general. So those are going to be your keeps. So of these 9 situations, I want to identify 3 that you would avoid. These are guys you don't trust to take over the job, even if the job becomes available. Maybe they're guys that even if they take over the job, you don't expect them to rack up a whole lot of saves or keep the job. You're going to pick 3 of them that you would stream. Okay, you would watch them. Maybe you would FAAB them a week or 2 early throughout the course of the season, maybe early on in the season, and then 3 that you would keep. That's the ASK. That's the K. And in that, I mean, you would actually draft them in the last couple picks of your draft, not spend the FAAB on, because you are a little bit more confident that their situation may actually present itself earlier in the season. So you can, again, make that decision early on. So the situations, I only picked one. So if you have qualms with these picks, like who is the actual setup guy, feel free to throw out another name from that bullpen. I did go ahead and say in San Diego, you have your choice between Jeremiah Estrada and Adrian Morion, and they are both being drafted pretty much equal amounts and at the same time in drafts. With the Dodgers, we have Tanner Scott, Cleveland, Hunter Gaddis, Seattle, Matt Brash. We've probably mentioned Matt, or I've mentioned Matt Brash's name more than a handful of times in this episode already. In Philadelphia, Brad Keller seems to be the next one up. With the Yankees, Camilo Doval, who they also traded. I mean, the Yankees just traded for every reliever under the sun last year at the deadline, Doval being one of them. And then in Boston, expected to be Garrett Whitlock. A lot of that, I think, is maybe some might be some fan casting, if you will, with Slayton also kind of being in as an option to back up Chapman. But Whitlock's the name I put here for now. And then with the Mets, Luke Weaver, who was the backup and closer with the Yankees as well, came over with Devin Williams. And then in Baltimore, Andrew Kittredge seems to be the obvious choice, assuming Felix Bautista does miss the entire season, of course. Ryan Helsley should be at the helm. So which category do you want to start with? Do you want to start with your avoids, your stream, and your keeps?
Oh, that's a great question.
So I don't want to just go down the list. I want to, let's make some tough choices here.
Let's go with keep. Because I think that will make the other decisions down the list a little more clear if we can get the guys we know we like
again
off this list.
The rule here for this keep means these are guys that you would draft. You'll draft, and they're going to be post ADP 325. So these are going to be your last pick or two of your 12 team online championship style drafts, 30 rounds, all that. And these are guys, these three guys, you have the most confident in making a difference early in the season, and you wouldn't be surprised keeping, if you would actually keep them on your team throughout the season, even if they ended up being a team streamer. You just fill them in, what have you. All right, you pick one, I'll pick one, and then we can fight over the third one.
Okay. Then, with that being the case, I'm going to take Garrett Whitlock as a keep.
Okay.
Because I think he is the guy if Chapman struggles. And it was the first time, 2025 was the first time in a long time we saw Chapman keep that whip low enough and keep the walks at a minimum so he could hold that role. It's been a few years since we've seen him pitch like that. And it was amazing. But I hope for him and for the Red Sox that he can continue to do that. But we've seen this before when he had his control and he was the closer and it just goes away at times. It actually seems like it's the other way around. It's usually not there. And then we get it at times and he's phenomenal. And so I probably on this list, he's not my favorite of these pitchers, but I think he is one of, if not the most likely to actually end up with the ninth inning of the guys on this list.
I will,
these 9 closers that have the job, most of them, if not all of them, I'm confident in unless they're injured. Sure. I feel like Chapman could lose the job due to performance.
It doesn't, I don't think this plays a role in this situation, but him being a lefty, always has to be on your mind.
Yep.
I think he's out earned that, that stereotype, if you will. Um, but he's also like 70 years old. Like he's also he's also quite old, especially in this. How old is he? Third no, yeah. How old? Oh, geez, Where's that birthday?
He's right at
He's
30.
38.
He'll be 30.
His age 38 season this year. So he's
Oh,
not
you're talking about
young.
Chapman. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, Chapman. Yeah. All right. My pick here, and should be no surprise because I've already said his name like 10 times on this episode, is Matt Brash. Just the strikeout rate, 28% strikeout rate, sub 10% walk rate, expected and shown over the last 2 seasons. Does give me a lot of confidence that he will be the type that I will be okay streaming in my, like, filling in that 9th spot in my pitching roster in those leagues, in if I need to. And he's the obvious choice to take over that role if Munoz were to miss any kind of time for whatever reason that might be. They trade, he gets hurt. That's the really reason for anything. He would be the one, and I've done this already. I've drafted him. I drafted him as my second reliever in Glarf. I don't need to use him. I don't need to draft him as a handcuff. Like, I find
Right.
that he would have enough value in general to just be on my team. But I think that it's worth mentioning. Like, that's the whole idea of this exercise is, like, if I draft Munoz, I have added incentive to draft Matt Brash. Now, I guess I'm gonna get the question I probably should have posed to you earlier. If I like Matt Brash that much, should I be focusing on Munoz more? Like, if I like one of these guys, if you like Whitlock, are you more likely to draft Chapman? Or, like, if I like Brash that much, should I be more apt to target Munoz instead of Kate Smith or instead of somebody right going around that same spot?
The way you phrased it right at the end there is where I was leaning, right? If you are taking a closer or reliever or even just a pitcher, if you're planning on taking one in that range anyway, maybe I give them a bump if I am confident I am high enough on that handcuff that I am going to hit that draft button before anybody else in the league does, right? Because it does mean that if you're doing that for that reason, if you're drafting Munoz for that reason, you have to get Matt Brash.
Sure.
Right?
Now,
So if I'm taking somebody in that range anyway, yes, I can see giving them a bump over guys in the same tier, but otherwise I'm probably not taking that into consideration.
to be fair, like, there's been 53 drafts in the last month, OCs,
Yeah.
and Matt Brash has been drafted in 2 of them. So it's not as though you have to have a quick trigger finger to get this handcuff of let's see, who Whitlock. I feel like Whitlock has been drafted in 11 of the 53. So these guys are not being drafted in nobody going past ADP of 325 has been drafted in every single of the 53 completed drafts.
Right.
And so you don't, I mean, if bumping him up from round 30 to round 28 is going to do it, I mean, I'm not batting an eye. And so that's the kind of, bump you would need. All right.
Yep.
So we got 2 guys in our keeps. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to say, let's move now to a different category. We're going to leave 3 guys at the end that we have to figure out where they're going to be. And we're going to basically play ask with the leftovers. Let's move up the list. We're going to go to stream. These are the guys that we wouldn't necessarily draft, but you would put them first on your watch list. You'd FAAB them a little bit early in the season, or at least you might FAAB them 2 or 3 weeks earlier than you think they might take over the role if you see anything happening. who's the first guy that comes to mind from this list for you?
As I said earlier, I'm confident in these 9 guys as in their performance. So unfortunately I'm thinking of this range based on injury risk and other things. Now, so Luke Weaver is going to be my pick because in addition, I think Devin Williams. We're going to see the Devin Williams we saw in the second half, but that first half was there last season. So that's in the back of my mind. But then also the back issues, those are something that don't go away forever. So I could see having Luke Weaver take up a roster spot and use him when I want him in place of my starter with his matchups that week. And I feel like at some point this season, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Williams is healthy all year. I feel like at some point this season, we'll see a stretch of a few weeks where Luke Weaver's their guy.
Yeah, I should have went first.
For the same reason?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think because that's where our discussion is why in this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the idea that there, like, of everybody on this list, the one that I think will definitely start the season as the closer, but has the clearest opportunity to lose the job early is Williams, and that's based on how he came into New York. Originally, like, he obviously struggled quite a bit after putting on pinstripes, or at one point or another. Bednar took the job from him when they traded for him as well. New York fans obviously can be the most unforgiving fans in all of baseball, so that's not totally surprising. Mets fans have their own baggage, so we'll see how that works out. But they seem to also embrace their closer a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
They've also had the luxury of having one of the best closers in the game for quite some time until now. All right, so I will then pivot. Oh man, there's the guy I'm going to stream. All right, I'm going to stay in New York. I'm going to go with Camilo Doval. And this has nothing to do with my thought that Bednar will lose the job, but I do believe Camilo Doval has looked a lot better in spring, and then also toward the end of last year. Even though he was lowest man on that 3-man totem pole between Williams and Bednar, and then Doval, he did not look great when he first came over, but I think he ended the season a lot on a high note, and he's looked pretty good in spring training. I do think there's an It's weird because I think Doval has become the clear number 2 to Bednar, but I do not think Bednar will lose this job. I do believe Bednar has a very strong, solid hold on that job in New York for the Yankees. But the idea here is that if something were to happen, whether it be injury or he does start struggling, I don't think the Yankees will be. I think they will be quick. I think they would be quick about it. I think you can get a week or two ahead of it by grabbing Doval off free agency and fabbing him for anywhere between $1 and $5 when you really think anything's happening or could be happening. And then if it doesn't happen, then you're out $1 or $5. And you can drop them 2 or 3 weeks in, and then continue that carousel. And I can feel pretty good about that. All right, so there's our streams. Make sure I take him off the board. I made this into like a mini draft, I guess.
Yeah, nice.
Which is always fun. All right, so now we're looking at our guys to avoid, and I'm going to take this one so that you don't take mine. Honestly, like this is weird. It's a weird thing to say. I think I would be avoiding. No, it doesn't make any sense. No, I can't justify that one. So I'm going to leave that one on the board. All right. I will avoid Andrew Kittredge in Baltimore.
Okay.
And mostly it's because the money. Baltimore went out and paid Ryan Helsley $28 million on a 2-year deal. So I mean, $14 million on average is not, outlandish, obviously, but they gave him a 2-year deal. With Felix Batista, obviously, out and expected to miss the entire season, if not, maybe he comes back in September with that shoulder issue. But we'll wait and see. I just think there's less of a chance, again, pending injury. And by that time, if it is injury related, you're not going to be able to get ahead of it. Right. So it's just not a situation that I'm going to spend a lot of my brain power on my time in my FAAB dollars kind of speculating on, because if it does happen, it's just going to happen because of injury and not because of performance. As bad as Helsley seemed at the after the trade deadline going over to New York, in a non-closer role, he did end the season well, and the Baltimore had enough confidence in him to come back to form when he was leading the league in saves in St. Louis, to give him a 2-year deal, $28 million. So that's why I'm probably just avoiding Andrew Kittredge in the whole Baltimore situation. I've drafted Helsley in multiple places, so I'm confident in him enough. But the rest of the bullpen, it's not worth my time.
Yep, I agree.
All right, well, that is my avoid. Kevin, who's your avoid?
I thought I was going to have to pivot. I thought you would take this guy. For me, it's Brad Keller, because I don't think Brad Keller is the next guy up in Philadelphia. He was amazing for Chicago last year, put in that late inning, high leverage role, but he doesn't have ninth inning stuff. The 27+% strikeout rate came with only a 12% swinging strike rate. So typically we can about double that for a strikeout rate is kind of more the norm. So I think the strikeout rate comes down, and we want strikeouts in the ninth inning. Also, Philadelphia for so long has been a team that all they needed was that ninth inning guy, and now they have an elite one in Duran, and he's got a long leash. I think it takes an injury for anybody else to get tried in that role, and even if that happens, I don't think it's Brad Keller.
And that's fair. Who is then? Who, if not Brad Keller, then who?
I think,
because he's the one being drafted. I mean, that's why he made this list.
Right. Alvarado's still there. When healthy, we all like to wish cast Jose Alvarado into this spot, right? And he's still there. Orion Kerkering is still there. I think both those guys will get the ninth inning chance before Keller. I think Keller was so good at what he did in Chicago that's where they want to leave him. I think that coupled with, as I said, I don't think his stuff is what we want to see in our ninth inning pitcher.
Fair. Yeah, I agree with that all alone. Maybe I just left him on the board so you could take him, so you wouldn't have to pivot, Kevin. Yeah. There you go. You're welcome.
Now, right. I will have Brad Keller on many of my rosters throughout the season, but I'm not drafting him.
All right, now
he's going to be our ratios guy. We'll talk about him a lot, I'm sure, this season until he's too highly rostered.
Sure. Yep. All right, we got 3 guys left. We're going to play one last round of True Ask, where we got to pick one of them to go into each category. But first, we are going to take one last break. All right, Kevin, True Ask fashion, avoid, stream, keep. The situation in San Diego is, just to remind everybody who's still on the board here, Jeremiah Estrada, Adrian Morion, you pick your poison. All right. Whatever category they're going to fit in, it's the whole San Diego situation that you are putting into these buckets. The Dodgers situation, which Tanner Scott is at the top of the list based, again, on who's being drafted in these 12-teamers. And then Hunter Gaddis in Cleveland. So the Cleveland situation after Cade Smith. Again, Hunter Gaddis honestly seems to be the only guy that I would think. At one point, I thought Hunter Gaddis would have taken over the role in general in Cleveland. Obviously now becomes second man in order to Cade Smith for the Guardians. So who are you avoiding? What situation are you avoiding? Which situation would you be watching or streaming? And which one would you be okay handcuffing and drafting, especially if you picked their actual closer?
I was really happy that you didn't pick this guy for a stream. I knew he wouldn't be your avoid, but for a stream, I was really glad you did not pick Jeremiah Estrada. I feel for the same reasons of the two keeps we already talked about. I love Estrada because I could see having Munoz and Matt Brash in my lineup several weeks throughout the season. Right? I can see having Chapman and Whitlock in my lineup several weeks throughout the season if they're both on my roster. Those guys, good enough ratios,
sure,
and some strikeouts that I would use them in that role if I needed a pitcher that week and didn't want to go, didn't like any of the matchups for guys available on the waiver wire. And I believe the same thing with Jeremiah Estrada in San Diego. I could easily have Miller and Estrada in my lineup at the same time. And I'm not dropping Estrada throughout the year unless he gets injured or things go way south. Right. So I think this is pretty easy for me. He was almost the first player we talked about in this section when we started this conversation. But I pivoted to Whitlock, but Jeremiah Estrada might be my favorite pitcher of all the guys we're talking about here.
Yeah, this was exactly how I felt about San Diego last year, and I was drafting Jason Adam everywhere. Obviously, it is what it is. I mean, that worked out quite nicely at the very beginning. He ended up with like 3 wins and 2 saves in like the first couple weeks of the season. So, I mean, results over process, but that's fine. Jeremiah Estrada seems to be taking that same exact role in this year's class from San Diego. All right, so we've got Hunter Gaddis versus Tanner Scott, or Cleveland versus Los Angeles. The thing in the situation in Los Angeles is that I never trust anybody to be the closer at this point.
I think for the same reason that I told you earlier that Diaz is the guy I haven't landed on is why that I can't avoid Tanner Scott. Then he has to be the stream, right? I think for me, as much as I'm not avoiding Scott or Gaddis, right? But for purpose of this exercise, I think after what I said earlier in the show about not landing on Diaz in any drafts, I would have to go with Tanner Scott as my stream here.
See, I would argue that it would be the other way around, and I would avoid Tanner Scott.
I could as well. That's
because I'd be avoiding the Dodgers situation as well altogether. I didn't realize if Robleski doesn't make the rotation, the 6-man rotation, which I expect the Dodgers to roll with, that they have 4 lefties in their bullpen between Scott and Vesia and Dreyer and then Robleski. But even without Robleski, that's still 3 lefties. That's still 2 more than a lot of bullpens have. Tanner Scott. So I don't think that plays a role at all. And that gives even more flexibility to Dave Roberts and the Dodgers bullpen coaches to kind of figure out at any given time. The thing is that I think this is going to be a very similar situation that we expect out of like Tampa Bay. I don't expect anybody to have, more than 3 saves over the course of the first 3 or 4 months because everybody's going to get a shot. When Diaz needs a day off, when Diaz, has pitched 2 days in a row and they're not going to make him go 3. Because that's the other rub is like, even though they paid him all this money, I don't expect them to drill Edwin Diaz down into the ground and have his arm fall off. I think they're going to take care of him in that way. There will be opportunities when there are like 3 save opportunities in a row for that third one to go to somebody. The question also remains is how many close games are the Dodgers going to win? There's this also, this is one way to bring it up. Something that Harris keeps talking about a little bit on his various podcasts is the idea that with all these talks about all these teams going with a 6-man rotation, this idea that your starters in that 6-man rotation have to go deeper into games. Otherwise, your bullpen is going to be.
Trevor May brought it up on that episode.
Yes,
it was a great point. Absolutely. I've been wanting to bring that up for a couple episodes, and there wasn't a good spot to fit it in, but that you brought it in perfectly. I loved that point. Yes.
So I picked Tyler Glasnow in my TGFBI draft, and I have no problem with that 6-man rotation. If anything, it bumps up those guys because the win possibility, right? But on the flip side, we're talking about these closer situations or these bullpen situations with a 6-man rotation. If there is, if one of those starters only goes 4 or 5 innings, your bullpen is really being taxed, and
you only have 7 guys.
A lot of opportunity for them to struggle not in a right way, like not in the way where like a natural way of struggling. It's just be like, I'm tired, dude. And so you could have Tanner Scott was coming into games in like the 5th, or he was the first man up for a couple times last season. And that was somewhat due to the fact that he was struggling toward the end of games. But they could be using these guys in any variety. I think that there's more of a clear shot that Hunter Gaddis in Cleveland is the guy that gets moved up into that position and roles as in the 7th and 8th inning on a regular basis for the Guardians. So that's why that would be my argument for I don't trust Sean Armstrong, Eric Sabrowski, Matt Festa to be the guys that fight Hunter Gaddis for that role, or they don't need to use Hunter Gaddis as the first man up type of thing in Cleveland. I think they're going to be a little bit more not strict, but like predictable in their usage.
Yep, I agree with that. That's the way I roll with it as well.
Yeah, there's just not a name in that bullpen that I recognize.
Well, Sean Armstrong did get saves for Texas last year.
I thought he'd be the guy in Texas.
A much better option than Armstrong.
Yeah. All right. Over under. Last thing, we're going to close this out here, is something I didn't write down. Over under on how many saves Kenley Jansen gets over 400 before at least being put into a timeshare with Will Vest and Kyle Finnegan at the end of the Detroit bullpen. Because I think he's the dude until he hits that mark.
I think he will still be the dude until September.
Okay.
Right. And then we might see like AJ Hinch, right? We may see like a Dodgers situation. When they get to September, they start moving guys around the way they're going to use them in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Especially if they have their spot wrapped up. And I think we could see similar in Detroit, because I don't know that Detroit, if they make the postseason, which we expect them to, I think most of us, we don't expect them to roll in and just stick with Kenley Jansen in the 9th inning every time they have the lead in the postseason. So they may start getting away from that in September. And we've seen that with Jansen on other teams, including the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. We've seen that with him over the years. So I think we have him for 5 months. So I see him going over it a little bit further than you probably do. Yeah. Not a lot, but a little further than you do, I think.
To correct myself, he's going for 500, not 400.
500, yeah.
He's at 476 at the major league level. So does he
get? And it might,
does he get 24 saves by September? That's the thing.
Yeah, it might take close to that long. So we might be right on the same page, same timeline there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. This was something that's always in the back of my head as I'm like considering drafting
Mm,
him, because you can get him later than Iglesias. Like
right.
like for some people that's a matchup, but like of a consideration. But you can get him pretty late, and if you think you're just drafting 25 saves out of him at that spot, I think that's a fair price that where he's going in like the ninth or 10th rounds of these 15 teamers. And the fact that he needs 25 saves to get to that mark. Yeah, that's I'm actually more on board with Kenley Jansen after talking about this than I think I was prior. Any other thoughts on the saves category, Kevin? Worth kind of closing this out here, or as we finish up all of our categories, any other words of wisdom that kind of brings it all together?
No, I'll just mention not all of them, but a few of the situations that are not so clear, and guys that may be the guy. We're not certain of it, or they wouldn't be available at this point in drafts. But guys that are available, there's a few. The Minnesota situation, I kind of like Taylor Rogers due to his experience in the role, to at least start out the first month or two in that spot. So I think you can give him a shot. I I have drafted Kirby Yates. I have not drafted Robert Stevenson for the Angels, and
Mhm.
I'm starting to think that was a mistake. I think Yates may get the first couple opportunities, but if Stevenson's healthy, I think it'll take it over fairly early. So I think I've been drafting the wrong Angel when I needed a closer late. Um, the Athletics, I don't care,
Nope.
just because half of their games in West Sacramento, I don't care who they're sending out there. Kind of like the Rockies, although I think Halverson probably has the job over Vodnik, and Vodnik's being drafted in several leagues I've seen, and I'd rather have Halverson, I believe, but I don't want any of them
Right.
for the same reason. I don't care who the closer is in West Sacramento. And then Arizona. Um, we've been wanting to see Ginkel in this role while healthy and going good for a long time. Every time he's got an opportunity, he hasn't. But I think he probably gets the shot first in Arizona. Just some of those options late. And I think the thing with these guys is because of where you're drafting, really quick trigger on letting them go. I think that's the thing. And with some of the other guys we talked about, when you're getting them as late, we don't have to hold on and think they're going to improve. You can change. I know I said earlier I don't like to change my spec, but if the guy's not pitching well, then he's not getting that job when it becomes
Right.
available, right? So you can have a really quick hook on these guys. Most of the guys we've talked about this evening.
Yeah, I mean, if you are specking on them to possibly take over the job in the next couple weeks and they're pitching well, fine. If they're not pitching well, to your point, they're not
Switch
going to
it
be the
out.
one that takes over the
Find
job
another guy to.
anyway.
Yep.
And otherwise, you're specking on guys based on their matchups. We talk about this in our ratios category. It's like these are guys that you think are going to pitch 3 times in the week as opposed to 2. There's a lot of opportunity. Maybe there's a lot of strikeouts to be had with their opponents that they're facing off against. And so you are burning and churning them based on their opportunity and their matchups, less so than the opportunities of them moving into a more high leverage role to get different categories. Now you can do both. You can churn a ratio guy and take a spec ad, but you only have so many bench spots, right? So know how your roster is constructed and what kind of flexibility you're able to give yourself. How many IL guys do you want to hold on to? How many not only streamers but spec like young guys and prospects that you're able to willing to go on, because you can't do it all. You can't do all of them.
Yep. And a reminder of something we've talked about the last couple of episodes. When you're choosing between these guys, yeah, we all automatically see that ERA. It's typically the first number listed, but I pay more attention to whip in this situation. Whip is my category they can destroy without me realizing that that's what happened. And then
Sure.
it's too late. So I would also throw out there, really pay attention to where you're sitting, what kind of hit you can take. Most of these guys are going to give us a bit of a hit.
I mean, whip plays a pretty strong role in the possibility of becoming a closer as well. Like every
Absolutely.
once in a while, you do get some guys that are going to walk the farm and they hold on to their job a little longer than you think they should.
Yep.
But most of the time, if you're walking a whole bunch of guys or giving up a bunch of hits, you don't want them in the 9th inning.
Right.
Typically. All right, Kev. After all of that, then that is going to wrap it up for episode 246 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening. And we bid you goodbye.